Welcome to the Food Professor Podcast, episode 24. I'm Michael LeBlanc.
And I'm Sylvain Charlebois.
The Food Professor is presented by Omnovos, the digital customer engagement solution for grocery and restaurant marketers, helping you solve your customers' most daunting question: what should I eat today? Find out how you get personal and grow sales with Omnovos at realcustomerengagement.com. Well, Sylvain, another great episode coming up in store for our listeners. We have our special guest, Sylvie Cloutier, CEO of CTAQ, such a well-respected and well-regarded voice of the food industry in Quebec, really in Canada as well, and a long-time partner for many of the entrepreneurs and the business people in the province. I wanted to kick off first. The news, the passing of a Canadian grocery icon, Galen Weston. And we've lost two grocery icons, and coincidentally in the same amount of time. Yep. In your mind, when you think of Galen Weston, what do you think were his biggest achievements as a grocer, accomplishments, innovation? What do you think he'll be remembered for?
Well, first of all, I've met Galen Weston once. The night he was actually inducted into the Canadian Business Hall of Fame, I was actually in the audience, and we were able to meet him. And it was the first time I met him. Obviously, his son was there too, and of course, during that night, you get a sense of what he's done, and read about him afterwards. Let's face it, Loblaws wouldn't be the Loblaws we know today without him. In fact, I'm not even sure if it would exist, because when he came back from Ireland in the 1970s, Loblaws was almost bankrupt, and he came back and saved it. I've always considered Galen Weston to be the godfather of private labeling in Canada, at least in the food industry. He was the one that really championed private labeling at Loblaws with No Name and President's Choice, and frankly, it just made Loblaws a better company, a better grocer. Beyond the financial savviness he had, and of course he invested in different aspects of retailing as well. But when it came to food, I would say that really his legacy revolves around grocery experience and private labeling. Essentially, what do you remember of him?
Well, what I remember is you're right about when you think about Loblaw today, the very successful, one of Canada's largest companies. You kind of don't remember that it was on its last legs, like in the 70s, right? It was a very troubled, it was a struggling organization. But, in my mind, it's that pulling together, you're right, private label, bringing over that innovation from Europe, from Tesco. That was happening in Europe. And really, the President's Choice line and the various presidents that have been in place for Loblaw. I think it's not easy to run a big Canadian diversified grocer, and I think he set his family, he set the people up that followed him for great success. And he's really an icon in the Canadian business community, not just
absolutely. Unlike his son, though, he was not very present in the media.
Mm-hmm. That's right.
I'm not sure if you knew this, but back in 1983, he was actually a victim of a kidnapping attempt, a failed kidnapping attempt, and after that, he decided just not to be as public, and he did his job. He did a fantastic job. He allowed other people to shine, like Dave Nichols, the late Dave Nichols, who really became the voice for President's Choice. And then after that, of course, his own son really became a predominant figurehead for the company as well.
Well, and now more, we should talk about that for a few seconds. Now more than a figurehead. Galen had elevated up to more of the holding company. A lot has happened, right? Selling Weston, selling the bakery, plus or minus.
It's not sold yet. It's not sold yet.
Yeah, it's not sold yet. That's true. Putting it up for sale. But, that is neither here nor there. But a bit of a shakeup, right, at Loblaw with Sarah Davies retiring early and leaving. I know you were a big fan of Sarah's and the work she was doing. So, new days ahead for Loblaws. And what do you think of the transitions? In some ways, corporate transitions happen all the time. But maybe Galen was just missing getting his hands on the operations,
Yeah.
from the higher
I
level.
was a bit surprised that they actually mixed a bunch of things as they came out
Mm,
in the media with several announcements,
yeah.
including putting the bakery business on the blocks and announcing that Sarah Davis was leaving. Personally, from a PR perspective, to honor Sarah's legacy, because she is a very well respected executive in the industry, I would have just announced that and maybe wait a couple of days later to announce that the that Weston Bakeries was for sale. Now, with the sale of Western Bakeries, and I'm really curious to know who's actually going to buy this thing. You kind of wonder what's in it for the holding company. Why would you need a holding company when all you have left is the retailer, the grocery business, and the REIT? You can basically have all that in
And the
one.
REIT, right? The real estate, yeah.
And so I do wonder, from a governance perspective, if there's not going to be more change down the road once Western Bakeries is sold. Yeah. Do you have any idea who's going to buy it?
No, I mean, I could think of some European companies that have a big footprint here. Who knows? Maybe an indie might get into the business. I think food is central. There could be a private equity. I've seen lots of private equity plays. There's a lot of money in the market right now.
Yeah.
A lot of money. There's a lot of M&A activity, not necessarily in grocery.
It's so
So
surprising, because about a year ago we would have thought, oh my goodness, the business war is going to stall, nothing's going
yeah,
to happen. It's the complete opposite.
yeah. It's and there's a lot of money chasing not many deals. So I don't know. I don't think it's going to be when they at that level of sophistication, they would have an idea of potential
The challenge in the food
potential buyer.
business, and I know that in bakery particularly, margins haven't gone up all that much in the last, I would say, 5 years. Things are much tighter, and input costs are going up, especially this year. And so, to for an investor to come in, I can see a European player or American player could be interested in Western bakeries, but yeah, protecting margins is going to become more and more challenging.
I mean, you've speculated, not speculated, but we've talked about Couche-Tard as a powerful player.
Yeah.
Maybe they backward integrate. I mean, thinking out of the box, so to speak, or out of the shopping basket. Interesting players could happen, right? Private equity could take it and
Yeah,
flip
no,
it.
absolutely.
You know,
But great,
and I
great
don't think
legacy
we.
for Mr. Weston, and yeah, it's been a really horrible month for grocers, losing two key players, historical players, in just 1 month.
Yeah. Well, I guess the upside, so to speak, of that is they have such a great legacy, and the legacy continues. Right, the Empire is
That's right.
such a strong organization; it's well run, and so is Loblaws. Right, so I think if you're going to leave, they've left a successful legacy behind them. And I don't think we've heard, by the way, the last of Sarah Davis. I think she'll be, she's not, she's a sophisticated operator, and we'll see where she winds up.
Yeah.
Um, let's talk about Netflix. Let's talk about this Seaspiracy documentary on Netflix. It's kind of pops up every now and then as a often watched. Have you seen the documentary?
I have. Have you? Have you watched it?
I watched it last night. Actually, a friend of mine sent it to me. And what did you think of it? I mean, it's interesting because it felt like to me sometimes that those Russian dolls, like we think this is the story, then I think this is the story, then like it just kind of continued on all the way till it got to the end. The last result is eat plant-based foods.
That's right.
Stop eating,
Don't eat
stop
animals. Yeah.
eating fish.
Yeah,
It,
you're right. I had the same sentiment at the beginning. They were talking about plastics, so yeah, absolutely, it's a problem. Let's talk about it. And then they got into sustainable fishing, which they believe, or the documentary would suggest that it doesn't exist. And then you scratch your head because when you talk to organizations like Marine Steward Council or Ocean Wise, well, that's what they do. Actually, they promote sustainable fishing. So if you decide to say that sustainable fishing is not something that should exist or does exist, then that becomes a completely different message altogether. In the end, you're basically encouraged to become a vegan. And the doc and the lead,
Right.
the director of Seaspiracy is in fact a vegan. So I was a bit confused by what the message actually was. What would you agree?
Yeah, I think I think they made some, like all documentaries. I think they hit the mark on a couple things. I mean, it was a good watch. I'd encourage anybody to watch it and
It's well
form
done.
their own opinions.
Yeah, it's well done.
Yeah, it's well done. It's worth watching. Yeah, like it's well put together, and you start thinking one thing, and they interviewed this whaler, and he goes, "Listen, I'm killing a few whales, but you're killing 10,000 chickens." So I mean, it does kind of say the broaden your lens and just understand the nature of food, but it was interesting. It came back to plant-based, and it's funny. Last night I had a plant-based burger, and it was just coincidence. I didn't do it, but I had this plant-based burger. It was delicious. I just love it. And by the way, for anyone listening who likes barbecue, I have to talk about my new barbecue, my Yoder Pellet Smoker.
I
It
don't
is
think it's just a barbecue. I think it's a project.
I tell you, it is a I'm as listeners may or may not know, I love barbecue. I've got 4 of them now. Maybe I'm over
So
indexing a little bit.
why do you have 4 barbecues? Seriously.
Well, yes, well, each one's a little different. So I have like
Your
a
neighbors
standard
must
Weber.
love you.
Oh yeah, the smoke coming out, particularly now, they're all gathering around. Like the cats, the neighborhood cats are loving me, I think, a little bit too. I have a standard Weber kettle grill with charcoal for just that charred flavor. I've got a little charcoal one for spadini, the Italian spadini. I've got one of those, and then I've got a Crown Verity made in Brantford, Ontario. This kind of the Porsche of barbecues. It's a mass feeding machine, and then what I was missing was I was going to get one of these, these green eggs or one of these big things. And then I decided to go with this pellet smoker, which infuses the smoke, and it's controlled by Wi-Fi, and it's like 400 pounds, but it's small. Like it's just anyway, it's just fun.
Right.
So, and everything tastes pretty good on it. Like, so anyway, we, of course, like many Canadians, we spend a lot of time making meals at home. We happen to like it. And so that's why I've got 4. And keep an eye out. I might be just might be starting a YouTube channel, just for fun and all that stuff about
That's
cooking. But anyway,
awesome. And so the next time I'm in Toronto, I got to go and for a visit, and maybe we'll
yeah,
actually do an episode together.
that would be a pile of fun. That would be a pile of fun. So speaking of plant-based burgers, I noticed the Whopper Impossible burger is launching. Is this another? Is this another step forward in the plant-based universe of food? What do you think? What do you make of it all?
I mean, I think it was inevitable. I mean, Burger King rolling out the Impossible Burger in its own country. Burger King is a Canadian company. People tend to forget about that. Or I should say, RBI is a Canadian company, and of course it owns Burger King. I think it's really much about providing options to a much more diverse market base now. If you don't have a plant-based option or a vegetable protein option on your menu, you're excluding a bunch of people. And it's not just vegans or vegetarians; it's people like yourself. Once in a while will eat
Yeah,
plant-based, like myself.
flexitarians. Yeah,
Exactly.
yeah,
And maybe you want to go out with a friend who is vegan, and if you don't have that option on your menu, well, guess what, you're losing the business of 2, 3, 4, 5 people at once. And so I think, McDonald's have done the math as well, and that's why they're going ahead with their Mac plant. I do have concerns about the word mech plant compared to Impossible Burger, but I'm looking forward to see exactly
yeah,
how that's going to be rolled out. And frankly, once you normalize the product, and it's getting normalized, I mean, a lot of things can happen. The narrative, the way it's sold, retail as well.
yeah,
Retailers are very influenced right now by what goes on in service, even though the food service industry was hard hit by COVID. Because they're the ones. I mean, service really was the one sector that brought forward the plant-based agenda. I
yeah.
mean,
Yeah.
In retail, we didn't see a whole lot of change until A&W in Canada, frankly. And so it's all good.
Yeah,
And I think,
that was a big breakthrough. Yeah.
yeah, it was. It was about 5 years ago, and I would say really the beef industry or the livestock industry, I think is starting to understand that there's a gain for them too by getting people more engaged in proteins, regardless. So the stomach share philosophy doesn't seem to be as predominant. That's just my reading. I don't know if you're reading it the same way, but I'm seeing a livestock industry that is a little bit less concerned.
Unpack that for me a little bit. So, as you're thinking, the more people that are eating burgers of any type is good for any kind of protein. Is that what you're thinking? How could that be good for them if more
Well,
people are eating plant based?
with the trifecta of meat, things got boring. You know, chicken, pork, beef. You bought what was on sale, and you're going home. And price was really the thing. I mean, you bought what was on sale. Now, with a value proposition, you're selling value, and you can actually you can you really can generate more growth by selling value. To monetize value is much easier than making money while you're selling a commodity. So that's why I think this vegetable protein play is re-energizing a sector of the grocery store that really needed, you know, it needed a change. And so
Breath of fresh air, so to
that's
speak. Yeah.
that's kind of how I see it.
You know what? I thought what you were going to say. That's a great point. I thought what you were going to say, because you've talked before about the up and down and uneven pricing structure around plant-based burgers. That they're priced at a very much premium, so it actually makes hamburger look inexpensive in some ways. Like it sets a different value equation in the consumer's mind. Anyway, I enjoyed my burger last night. It was fantastic. Look forward to the day to have you over, and then we're going to
Yeah.
do the whole cooking show, and we'll do the show to be just a pile of fun. Last couple of quick things. You mentioned processed food, and you seem to come to the defense of processed food
Yes.
over the past couple of weeks, and I think you caught a few people off guard. But unpack that for me. What's your, what are you thinking?
Yeah, so as you know, I'm the editor of Trends in Food Science and Technology, which is the number one food science journal, scientific journal in the world. And I have the pleasure to receive manuscripts every day from around the world. So as editor, I have to either desk reject or send them over to reviewers. And I received a manuscript about 6 months ago on how we classify processed foods, and read the manuscript, fell in love with it. But of course, I'm just the editor. I can't really say, let's publish this as soon as possible. I have to send it to reviewers, and blind reviewers actually just loved it as well. And so the paper itself is going to come out in Trends in 2 or 3 weeks. So, and I actually shared a draft with Sylvie. She has a copy of it, and the study itself, it's a meta-analysis of how we classify processed foods, and at the end of the day, the group of authors have realized that there's a lot of confusion out there, for one, and secondly, there seems to be this notion that industrial practices will define the nutritional value of food products. So if it's processed, it means it's bad, essentially, which is not the case at all. There's
Like
plenty.
a stigma. It's
That's right.
it's
I
like
mean,
stigmatization, right? Yeah, yeah.
exactly. It's like cooking at home. I mean, cooking is processing. Some people actually cook good food, and some people cook not so good food. I mean, that's basically it. And so, what the group of authors suggests is to focus more on the outcome, on how, on the nutritional value of food products, regardless what goes on in the food industry at all. And so changing the narrative a little bit, and it was it's a bit of an audacious study, but very timely,
Yeah, yeah.
and processors will like it because they've been trying to provide some great food to Canadians, but they've been clobbered by judgmental evaluations sometimes coming from policymakers, but academics also. I mean, some of them have been very judgmental towards processed foods or ultra processed foods. The food guide actually mentions it, and so I think it's time for a pause and rethink this essentially.
Well, once that is available to the public, we'll put a link in and into the show notes so that people can read, judge for themselves. But it sounds like a great piece of work. Last thing, quick thing. Sylvie mentioned something else. She was involved in the Canadian Grand Prix, which is a food
Yes.
innovation. We sponsored that last year, and I'm happy to say we're going to be sponsoring it again for 2020. The finalists were just released. I'll put a link to all the finalists, and I'm going to arrange a few bonus interviews with some of the makers who made it to the final steps, and so we're thrilled. I'm thrilled to have to support in a real way, to in addition to what we do here today, to support the industry with in any way we can with celebrating innovation and the makers in Canada and all the great products that are coming out.
Absolutely. No, it's a great program, and very honored that we're part of it.
Very good. All right. Well, let's take it home. Thanks again to Omnovos for being our presenting sponsor. And if you liked what you heard, you can subscribe on Apple, iTunes, Spotify, your favorite podcast platform. Please rate and review, and be sure to recommend to a friend or colleague in the grocery, food service, or restaurant industry. I'm Michael LeBlanc, producer and host of the Voice of Retail podcast and a bunch of other stuff.
And I'm Sylvain Charlebois.
Have a fantastic week, Sylvain, and talk to you again soon.
Barbecue on, buddy.